So let's begin. So firstly, thank you to the British Sauna Society team for bringing us together for this conversation this evening. And thank you, Lassi, for joining us. Yeah, an honour to have such an expert.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, great. Honour to have such an expert in the room. So a couple of small housekeeping. We are recording the meeting and it will be going on to YouTube at a later date. So just to make you all aware of that. And for anyone who's got any burning questions, we have got the possibility for you to ask questions to Lassi at the end of the session. And so please put those into the chat during, as they arise throughout the session. And Gabrielle, who's here supporting us behind the scenes, but she's actually going to come on later on and host the Q&A. So yeah, please do, if you've got any burning curiosities, please let us know, because hopefully we'll get a chance for Lassi to answer those as well. So yeah, I'm super excited to have this conversation actually, Lassi, because when I started building saunas, I didn't have this fantastic book available, which is beautifully comprehensive, and it talks about culture and sauna use and sauna design and sauna build, all from a Finnish perspective. And at that time, I hadn't even been to Finland to have saunas. And I know, and in fact, actually, just before we start, I'm also going to start attempting to use sauna, because actually, when we're talking about sauna, we're really talking about the Finnish hot room. The sauna is how the Finns pronounce it. So let's start there. And so, as I imagine many sauna want to be sauna designers and builders, you go online and you're trying to find information, and you just get so many different opinions and sources, and you should do this and that. And I mean, there isn't really any hard and fast rules. There's a lot of flexibility in sauna building. It's beautiful to have such a solid kind of Bible. And my experience of now having traveled to Finland and experienced a lot of Finnish sauna, but also other countries as well, is that I really find that the Finnish sauna is Finland is where I've had some like really top quality sauna experiences, where I come away just astounded at the quality of the heat and the löyly, the steam. And so, yeah. So to try and kind of get to the essence of how these saunas are constructed. Yeah, I'm curious about how you even came to write this book. Did you see that there was a need? Where does the story begin?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Thank you so much first of all that you took the time and to have this conversation with me, facilitated by the British Sauna Society. And yeah, it's been quite interesting. I think approximately almost like a 10-year story that's been leading into the publication of this thing. I have prepared a very short presentation, so kind of maybe it'll be a little bit more entertaining if I show you something as well I'm talking. So let's try doing this as well. So my story with sauna actually begins almost 10 years ago, when there are maybe like a few facts from Finland. So we're a country about like 5.6 million people, so that's probably less than in the whole London area. But we've got quite a lot of more land mass, and we've got quite a few saunas. No one actually knows how many of those are, somewhere around 3 million, I guess. But most of the, since like for 70 years, people have had in Finland this kind of tradition that many people who live in the cities tend to get their own cabins. And 10 years ago, it was my time, although I'm actually from the countryside, so it doesn't kind of have a similar impression on me. Nevertheless, so we got a cabin with my wife. And it comes with a sauna, but in this case, the sauna that was embedded in this blue cabin was actually quite bad. I think so. One of the kind of myths about the sauna in Finland is that all of the Finnish saunas are great. Well, that's actually not, unfortunately, not true. So you can find quite bad examples there as well. And we actually even bought in one, but luckily there was a way. We had more room on the property to build more. So I actually started doing my very first sauna design approximately exactly 10 years ago. And this finished up with building this somewhat rustic, I think like a mixed style sauna building back in 2016. And also in 2016, I started publishing this, my kind of so I have like an academic background. So I used to do different kind of research also around design. So it was kind of it felt natural to me to kind of document as I my kind of discoveries about sauna design as I went along. I wasn't kind of expecting that it would turn out this way in a way that I was kind of hoping that I'd just be able to find a nice book about the Finnish sauna design and then kind of implement or use that in guiding my work. But it turned out that actually there were a lot of questions that were not satisfactorily answered anywhere. So, of course, the literature that we have here in Finland is kind of completely different than what's been available in English. But nevertheless, it was not kind of quite enough. So I started kind of doing my own stuff and my own research and writing more like a blog type of thing, which turned out. So I published my first actual book by a Finnish professional publisher in 2019, which then got adapted into English. And the book that some of you might already be familiar with, The Secrets of Finnish Sauna Design, was made. This was really an adaptation of the Finnish book because when I had been writing for the kind of sauna native Finns for the past 5 years, and I realized that there are a lot of things that people around outside Finland they don't really know about the Finnish sauna. So it's necessary to kind of explain things more thoroughly. And so this book included this kind of a quite long preface, almost like 100 pages of trying to explain that what is this Finnish sauna practice and what are the saunas really like. Something that people here kind of take for granted and people outside Finland don't kind of necessarily comprehend at all. Mm. So then things moved on. I've been kind of starting to offer professional services around sauna design. Like this year, I started this Finnish Sauna Design.fi, but I already kind of, if we kind of come back to this, the secrets of Finnish sauna design. So this kind of started out quite steadily. This came out during COVID, so people were still kind of mostly hiding back home. There wasn't kind of public saunas even in Finland. They didn't kind of do too well back in 2021. And overall interest in saunas was just globally starting to kind of heat up. So, for instance, particularly North America, I think came a little bit behind compared to like you guys in UK or in Norway. Things had been kind of picking up speed already before COVID, and then really like in the kind of 2022, 2023, things really kind of got sped up. And yeah, that so I kind of the book this book was kind of well received initially by a small amount of people. Then more and more people have discovered it over the years, so it's been selling several thousand copies. And one of the things is that so this book was clearly, as the name implies, it was about design of the Finnish sauna. So so the book received quite nice reviews on Amazon and kind of good comments. But one of the things that people usually kind of complained is that it was missing out information about how you build a sauna. Well, I mean, that was a kind of intentional because I even in the book back cover, I'm saying that this is not a construction manual. But then I quickly realized that if I'm going to write something else, it has to be some kind of construction manual in order to address, because it's pretty clear that this kind of what you see here, this kind of image of like old style sauna cabin. So this is kind of relatively simple construction. But nowadays, when people are more and more kind of, they want to have this kind of a like I do have here, and most of the Finnish households have an integrated or detached houses have the integrated sauna. But so when you kind of go building something inside another building, the construction style is completely different, much more complicated. And even though it's kind of people here in Finland, all the builders really know how to do that. But builders outside Finland haven't really had access to this information, how you do the modern integrated inside sauna, before now. So that was kind of my main motivation to start working on the Finnish sauna, or the book that now is now called Finnish Sauna, Steam, Wood and Stone, and How to Build Your Own. My kind of working title for this was actually the secrets of Finnish sauna construction, but apparently the publisher was more wiser than I was and decided to come up with this beautiful name. Thank you, John. That's pretty much the story of the book. So for me, this was kind of a step from kind of I've been kind of more counting myself as a designer. So from design towards actual construction. And that's kind of a story of the book. Well, this book now has also, once again, it has about 100 pages about the Finnish sauna culture, Finnish sauna history, the health benefits of sauna. But really, the focus and the main beef, at least in my perspective, is really in providing those, I think, quite unique instructions on how you do the kind of modern style Finnish, how you build the modern style Finnish saunas. So this is kind of now one, at least, way to kind of get reliable information on that matter. That's pretty much it. This is how it happened. The writing of the book itself took about 2 years, or well, less than 2 years. It's been practically started a little bit less than 2 years ago, and spent actively writing about 60 days, but there were quite a lot of long breaks in between. And that's how it came to be. Yeah, and I think I'm going to be next week actually in London, so you can come and talk to me if you want to have more information about the book at Hackney Week. But this is, I think, this should suffice for the kind of brief history of the Finnish sauna written by myself. So, how did this sound, Katie?
Perfect. Thank you for the introduction. And it segues quite nicely with your trip to London, because I was going to ask you, what's your experience of saunas in the UK? Have you been here often? And, what's your kind of thoughts on what you've seen?
Well, for one thing, I have to say that as I was reading that just in August, I actually had the time to go look into Emma O'Kelly's new book about the wild saunas in UK, and I was kind of astounded by the so quick development of this totally new sauna scene across the UK. A lot of saunas in very beautiful locations, and kind of a really high level of enthusiasm about bringing the opportunities for communal bathing to places where people have had. Well, a lot of people hadn't have any kind of an access to a sauna in most of the cases, and I think that's been kind of it's like truly wonderful and inspirational. Also, even from the Finnish perspective, that there are so many people who are so highly devoted into making the saunas happen all across the UK. I have to admit that personally, I haven't had really to. My kind of life has been. So I have to admit that I'm not a kind of full-time sauna person. I do have a different job as well, and kind of doing several things in my life here in Finland has kind of created somewhat obstacles of doing very long sauna expeditions outside Finland. As I had the opportunity to attend in May the British Sauna Society's event, so I got a little bit of like exposure about what sort of a sauna scene there is in London, and I was also kind of very much one of the reasons I'm kind of returning to Hackney Week. I had the opportunity to visit that site, and I was kind of very impressed by the fact that how much like time and devotion they really spend in developing that individual side, and it's actually just one of the many, even in London or across the UK. So I'm actually very happy to see how this. Things have been developing in UK. I'm not going to try and kind of make any kind of a qualitative reviews about how the saunas are, but I think it's very important that there's kind of more democratic access to saunas, which is, I think, because we've seen also, particularly more maybe in North America, the rise of these like the other ship style. As a highly like what I call high-end curated experiences, which might also have their place, but I think I personally kind of have more sympathies towards these very kind of a low end, low threshold locations where we give people opportunities to kind of get to know one another, get to know the heat more intimately at their own pace.
And I actually really love that you're not sort of casting aspersions on what you've seen so far build wise, because actually the real thing is about doing as best we can with the information we've got. And actually, also what you're doing here is providing us with some really solid information.
Yeah, I'd say that I'm much more critical of my kind of own countrymen who still also do kind of occasionally fail at their sauna builds here. So I think the problems that we have here in Finland is not so much that people wouldn't know, particularly when it comes to construction, how to build stuff, because you can see you can find beautiful looking saunas which are still kind of functionally not that great because they've been failures in design. That's like a I mean, in order to get this kind of everything right or get a kind of good functional sauna, you need to first succeed in the design and then succeed in the construction. And there are two kind of distinct stages where you can make mistakes.
Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering whether to start with building or design. I was going to start with building. I feel like, okay, I want to start with a burning question. This is something that people often ask me. So I'm curious to know what, because I've actually built 15 saunas in the last 8 years. And a lot of them have been in horse trailers, or I've done a lot of upcycled builds as well. So particularly when you're starting to look at saunas and materials, there's a lot of information like saying that you need to have these, it's like thermo wood, or it's got to be aspen, or it's got to be, there's all these sort of sauna woods that you can access. But obviously for us in the UK, it's quite expensive and not so easy to get hold of things that are produced over in Europe. And I've experimented with lots of different woods in the sauna. So I'm wondering, is there any criteria? How can you tell if you're not using wood that's marketed as a sauna wood? How do you know that it's going to be suitable?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there are like several ways to judge the suitability because in sauna we practically need at least two types of timber. Usually we use one type of timber that goes for cladding, so walls and ceiling. And for those surfaces, I think we have a little bit more degrees of freedom. I think the biggest kind of question is that what happens to this type of wood when it gets heated up? Particularly locations in the sauna room that are closest to the sauna heater tend to heat up noticeably. Maybe sometimes they might get to like 120, even 140 degrees Celsius. And you should be kind of aware that how the wood will behave. Well, that's actually, if you don't have any clue about what will happen there, you practically just stick a piece of that type of timber into a regular oven, heat it up like say 180 degrees Celsius, and then you'll definitely find out how the wood will start to behave. Does it kind of immediately go funny looking? Does it start to smell odd? Because there are some wood species, maybe not here in Europe or in the UK, but particularly if you go to like Africa or Asia, some of the wood species might be kind of not that kind of good. They might emit like off gas, certain, if not kind of necessarily bad or kind of hazardous gases, they might still be kind of funny smelling. So that's one thing. Then then the other kind of category of wood that we usually need is the bench and the decking, and that's there we have a little bit different type of maybe criteria because the benches tend to kind of be exposed to water. Maybe if people are swimming, there might be kind of water coming in from cold plunge, rivers, sea. But I think the seawater is kind of nasty. Uh, uh, if you have like a lot of seawater coming into the sauna, then you would probably want to rinse it up every quite often so it doesn't kind of stay in the sauna for too long, which means that there's going to be a lot of water. So the water actually has to be able to kind of tolerate humidity to quite a high degree. So that's something to be taken into consideration. As such, I think your observation about the fact that we so the type of woods species that people here in like Eastern Europe, Northern Europe, you should talk about are something that's been around here common for several decades. Although I think that this kind of thermally modified timbers, they're kind of a relatively new thing, but they're definitely the kind of all the craze here in Finland. So most of the new saunas that are being built, both residential and commercial, tend to use thermally modified timbers. But I don't really think it's not like there's no kind of definitely one single way how you should go at it. Well, yeah, and one more thing about the benches is that, of course, the density of the wood species also plays a little bit of a role here. So if it's very dense wood, first of all, it'll kind of conduct heat more rapidly. So you'll at the same temperature, it'll feel hotter, which might sometimes kind of if you like to keep the saunas quite high temperature, then it might kind of be inconvenient on your bottoms to be sitting there if it's very dense. And another thing is that if it's like a private one, the extra weight and the kind of like extra mass that you put into the sauna will definitely slow down the heating, because you also need to heat up all the kind of bent structures. So that's one consideration as well. Same thing goes if you kind of do very kind of heavy wall materials, that they kind of then start to suck in quite a lot of heat.
Oh, interesting. Do they suck the heat out or would they hold the heat? So say, for example, you
They
like a
will.
sauna at a lower temperature, would it be an idea to use the heavier woods to kind of maintain a kind of
Well,
radiant
that's
heat?
kind of interesting idea. I think how that would work. I think it once again a little bit depends on whether it's like a more public or private setting. Because
Mm,
I think in general, when people are in private saunas, people usually kind of, for instance, appreciate the fact that the sauna would heat up in quite a short amount of time.
mm,
And in that case, it doesn't really help if you have a lot of energy stored in your sauna if you're going to use it for 1 hour and then
mm.
uh, kind of do something else. So I would probably, for that reason alone, probably not do that. Maybe in a public setting, it might be a different case. But I think because people have been for ages warning people against using uh, this kind of heavy and dense wooden materials, so I don't think that there have been not that many experiments done, particularly
Yeah.
not here in Finland.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. And on the other side, I've used some really inexpensive woods to
Hmm.
good effect. So, for example, we can get untreated pine
Yeah,
just at timber yards here.
yeah,
And I've gone and made sure I tried to find one with not many knots in, which is where the
hmm,
sap's usually stored, right?
yeah.
And it's kind of kiln dried, and that's worked very well in a
Yeah,
number of
I think.
saunas.
Yeah, I think. I mean, here in Finland, people do use like a regular pine and well, and particularly spruce. Spruce has been kind of a normal material and still kind of readily available, and a lot of people use it at least in kind of most uh, low cost installations. But of course, it does have the sap is a real issue in many cases. It depends a little bit how hot you want to run it, but I think your experiences may vary if you kind of there's always a kind of chance if you use pine or
Mm.
spruce in that sense.
Yeah, maybe I've been lucky so far. Because another
Yeah,
material I
yeah,
also used was scaffolding boards. So when they have
hmm,
the platforms that go up the sides of buildings, old
yeah,
scaffolding boards that have been split in two. But I think they were just so old that they were really, really dry. Um, and it's interesting you're saying about the salt water, particularly for the saunas that are near the sea, because I found that the wood copes quite well, actually, even with
hmm,
salt. But the fixings, the way the saunas are constructed, and I'm wondering
yeah.
if you make recommendations around
Yeah,
that in your book.
in the book, I basically have resorted just saying that I would kind of recommend using like stainless steel fasteners all around. They are kind of more expensive, so I think that it might be kind of overkill if you're just doing your kind of a home sauna that's going to be extremely dry most of the time. But then, particularly if we go to this kind of a seaside installations, then I think it'll definitely pay off that your
Mm.
fasteners don't kind of rust to pieces before your decking kind of falls apart.
Yeah, I've made that mistake as well. And another thing I saw in the book that I thought was interesting and I haven't seen before is the idea of using stainless steel bench supports.
Mm, yeah,
So I've only ever seen benches constructed from wood.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
is that
That's
common?
yeah. I think it kind of mostly pays off in public sauna settings where the benches might be in kind of very heavy use, and then it's kind of clear that the benches need to be replaced. maybe every couple of years even. Well, that depends a little bit like how like heavy the usage, but then actually makes it kind of quite a lot more easy. But here in Finland, you can find also for like private use. Of course, I think the aesthetics don't really kind of usually serve you that well if you go with a metal frame. But I think it's particularly in like certain occasions where the benches have where it might be kind of complicated otherwise to support them if you have very like long sections, which is usually not because a lot of the kind of private saunas are tend to be quite compact. But if you kind of go where you have like a say like wall is beyond 3 meters, 4, 5, 6 meters, then it's practically the wooden structures get much more complicated, and then the steel structure might actually save you or make things somewhat easier. But I think it's particularly in the kind of instances where you know that you will be replacing the decking material every now and then, but you don't want to necessarily change the frame and structure.
Mm. And another thing that I also thought was quite unusual and something I've not seen before in many saunas here, although I have seen it in Finland, and it's also something people always consider but aren't quite sure if it's really possible, is the idea of reducing the volume of the room, because obviously, you know, the size of the stove is based on the volume of the room. And so there's this question of like, can we reduce the volume of the room by blocking in underneath the benches? And you
Yeah,
actually
well,
suggest that that's a very viable option in your book.
yeah, that is true. You can kind of reduce the overall volume quite easily. I think I hope I'm just hopeless trying to remember what I exactly wrote in the book, because this is actually something that comes up every now and then as I've been recently dealing with more and more public saunas. And the thing is that that works, but it's actually not a panacea. I think it's kind of most effective because if we think about like how the sauna actually heats up, so the sauna will heat up like from the top down. So that basically means that all the volume that we can extract from the kind of let's say top half of the sauna room, that will count most, because the most of the heating energy will actually be stored in this kind of upper part of the sauna. We might call it like heat cavity or steam pocket, a little bit depending on your vocabulary. But that basically means that if we, for instance, block out, if we have a simple like two tiered bench structure, and we just block out the kind of lowest level, the eventual like heating demands won't be actually that much affected, because it won't most of the it would not be soaking up that much energy in the first place, because it's relatively low in the sauna room. If you cut out similar kind of volume from higher part of the sauna room, it would be kind of different deal. So but it sometimes it so much depends on what your kind of overall layout is. And if you for instance, if you have like several tiers, like at most I've seen like four levels of benches. If you actually do all those four levels of benches, I'm pretty sure you'll be actually making a really kind of significant reduction in the thermal needs of the sauna. But this is kind of so I think unfortunately this has to be a little bit like evaluated case by case, and you have, because you need to kind of take this like vertical dimensions into consideration there.
Okay, so it's not a
But
simple calculation of
no,
just
you know,
reducing the
and
volume of the
I think
room and suddenly
yeah,
more.
I
Yeah.
think really where this comes in handy, because one thing is that it's also going to be somewhat more complicated to build, but sometimes this actually might be desirable just for the fact that you want to use the space underneath the benches for some other purpose. For instance, if you're building a mobile sauna, you might actually want to kind of carve out that space and use it on the other side of the trailer to store firewood or some other supplies. So I think that's part much more significant way if you're kind of scarce on space in the beginning.
Yeah, I think that's really, really interesting. and actually something that anyone that's thinking about building a trailer sauna right now might want to consider for sure. And on the height of the room, so obviously we have the law of löyly, which in very simple terms means in Finland you're really aiming to always have your feet above the top level of the stove. And this is so that you're really in the heat of the room, not getting cold feet. However, it's hard to hit that when you're maybe building in a horse trailer box and you've got a limited height. And actually in the UK, we've got a restriction in private gardens. Unless you've got a very large space, if you're quite close to another person's property, we can only build to 2.5 meters. And so we have this sort of quite a lot of height restriction around. So I was curious about how to compromise, or how can we, yes, like I can see you got the heater really low down there. So yeah, what can you share about that with us?
Yeah, this is quite a common observation if you try to kind of find your way around all these best practices or different kind of guidelines in sauna design, and that is why I kind of usually kind of describe this whole affair of this kind of sauna designers, that this is kind of look like a game of chess or something where you kind of go back and forth and trying to kind of figure out if you change this, how does it kind of affect that? And for instance, this kind of the law of lowly business usually kind of brings you different kind of despair, because it seems that if you particularly if you're anyhow fancy getting this kind of more tall heater that has a lot of stones, might be kind of visible stones, some of them, you usually kind of run into the problem that your kind of ideal ceiling height will kind of go somewhere between 2.5 or 3 meters. And of course, then you also need to have insulation and paneling and roofing and whatnot. So it becomes easily impractically high. So that's something that we need to kind of figure out how to work around that. And that's easier said than done. The problem really with this kind of I think once again we see that there's kind of clear difference between how this thing plays out. If we kind of compare more like public and private settings, because the kind of fact that how, as I was previously describing, that how the kind of sauna heats up starting from the kind of ceiling and way down. When you kind of heat up the sauna for a long period, long enough, say like several hours, if not like half a day, the temperature differences between the ceiling level and the kind of middle, or like at least two thirds, they will kind of reduce over time. So it's actually, in that sense, it's not that critical kind of design flaw, but it will kind of you might still feel it, because this original Finnish law of löyly, so the löyly referring to the steam will kind of persistently still try to kind of obey the law, even if you have been able to heat up the sauna more evenly. So it's not that simple. So I think it depends on like this type of settings where you have like extremely tall heaters. These can be kind of tricky. I will kind of at least when I'm kind of talking with my customers who are trying to find their own perfect Finnish sauna experience, I usually kind of advise caution in terms of doing these tall heaters in spaces that are clearly not suitable. I think in this case, what we see in this photo, I think this is also a little bit something that I would not use in my own home sauna. Probably I would at least would like to still have a higher bench structure than that's available here. I mean, the heater itself and the heat experience might be otherwise extremely nice in the long run, but there are going to be some challenges with the steam. At least that is my kind of experience. So no easy way around it. If you have like extremely like tough constraints in your own space, you could think about this air circulation system. Like I actually have here at my home sauna, I use this, my electrical heater includes this air circulation system just for the fact that I can kind of, I have very low ceiling. So that has been the only good way to get around that problem.
Is that the Saunum device?
Yes, the Saunum device. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard good things about those. And actually, that's moving the heat from the top and bringing it to the bottom of the room to kind of balance out that differentiation. Because it is, I've definitely noticed that saunas with raised floors are usually a much better experience. I mean, really, because your feet aren't cold, right? I mean, that's the whole point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the kind of good part about their circulation system is that it actually affects equally both the heating and then the steam, because it also forces the steam to kind of move around in the sauna in ways that would otherwise be only experienced in an Aufguss session.
Yeah, and I suppose that's one of the reasons why things like Aufguss is obviously modern, but with the more traditional practices such as whisking, really, it would have been about bringing heat to the body too. So, for example, catching the steam in a whisk and hitting your feet with it is another way of balancing out the heat, the differentiation with your feet.
Yeah, as you mentioned, whisking, I think then if you have these kind of particular applications that you'd like to have in your sauna, whether it's whisking or Aufguss or something else, that also kind of puts in new type of demands for the design, because like for the whisking purposes, you really need to have a certain kind of setup with benches, or otherwise it'll be physically impossible. But then you also have to understand the kind of heating part, because if you don't have like the right heat conditions, it'll be kind of quite uncomfortable for the person who's actually doing the whisking, or then it might be too cold for the person who's trying to enjoy the whisking. So those are a little bit more demanding use cases.
I know that in my experience when I've been designing saunas, it's as a design, doing the design piece, and I imagine you have this too, is this sense of like the more kind of things that you're trying to bring in, the more sort of creative you have to get. Because there's one way where you can just design to optimal to one type of usage, and I don't know how much experience you've had of this, but what I've found is I'm trying to design a sauna that's great for whisking, great for public sauna sessions, and for Aufguss, and maybe something else I haven't even thought of yet. And so, yeah, it's quite a fun sort of process. Like the designing of the benches can be one of the coolest parts of the process.
Yeah, I think one maybe kind of a word of comfort is that even though, particularly if you're building your own sauna, you always have a chance to kind of, when it comes to benches, if you do this kind of experiments, you can probably kind of revise them or kind of just redo the benches later on, if they are not kind of built as like for instance, solid blocks of concrete and kind of cast into place. But if they're made out of wood, you can probably tear them down and make modifications if you just have the energy.
What's your favorite part of the design process?
But that's a good question. I think I'm kind of generally speaking, I'm more like a concept design person myself. So I kind of like this very early phases of the design process where it's not kind of really clear that what sort of like how, for instance, if we have like in a lot of the assignments that we do, so much of my design work actually happens to customers in North America, and most of the time I'm going to be being presented by a black box in a kind of a larger layout section which says sauna, and then there's nothing in it except the door. And in many cases, I think the most exciting part is to kind of imagine that how the space could be filled with the sauna, and trying to kind of find out what sort of like plans do the owners have for the use of the sauna, and how can we kind of make the most for these future sauna users of the space. And I mean, then I think that's the kind of most creative phase, really. And then you kind of little by little, all the pieces of the puzzle kind of go into different places, and it gets more and more detailed, and there's a little bit less creativity by the end of it, because then again, there are just things kind of start to follow in a certain order when you proceed.
Yeah. I've noticed we're getting close to the end of our time, Lassi, and I feel like this could go on for many, many hours, but we are time bound. So one thing I'd really love to just touch on, because I feel like this is really, really key. And actually, when I started building saunas, I also had the privilege of various sauna people and Finnish people coming and being in my sauna, and everyone, everyone loved to give an opinion, and they'd be like, oh, you could do this and that, and everyone was always like wanting giving you something you could change or improve. But the one thing that I got advised to do most was add ventilation. So put a vent in there, put a vent in that corner, this corner, and I was like, you hear that ventilation is so important, but what feels like one of those things that seems so confusing when you try to start understanding how to do it. I mean, how wrong can you go? Can you, how many vents can you put in before you've overventilated?
It's called hyperventilation. Well, that's kind of a good question with not an easy answer, because I think the ventilation is something that also here in Finland. So I do have a few customers here in Finland, and most of the customers I have in Finland usually have questions about the ventilation. I'm trying to improve that. Ventilation is much more tricky, and if you can kind of go at least still some years ago, if you went looking for information about sauna ventilation on the internet, you find oftentimes conflicting information, and that's kind of natural because I mean you don't really see the ventilation. You can kind of deduce how it works when it's heating up, but there's actually not a very simple answer to this, because there's like every sauna, or the kind of main sort of main points about what affects the decisions in the sauna ventilation are whether it's like a interior sauna inside another building, whether it's kind of cabin or kind of a standalone building. Those are kind of very important things on how the ventilation can be best both designed and implemented. Then we have the matter how the sauna is being heated, whether we have like a wood burning heater, whether we have electrical heater, whether we have like a heat storage heater. It's kind of old fashioned style. Those are the few kind of important decisions or kind of important factors that determine how the sauna should be ventilated. So there's actually not the most important aspect really is that there's some consideration for ventilation. If we think about like in the Finnish sauna building tradition, in the book, I have kind of outlined that there are like 4 different periods of Finnish sauna in Finnish sauna history, and for a very long time, I think that even in Finnish saunas, the ventilation was almost like incidental, because the buildings were built in a way that they were not kind of fully airtight as the buildings are nowadays. So there was just enough amount of like incidental ventilation that it made sauna kind of air good enough. And nowadays we kind of somewhat more capable of building buildings that are airtight. And then I think there are different kind of problems that might appear if you do the ventilation wrong, and I think the kind of worst of them are if you try to kind of do this so-called mechanical ventilation, and you kind of set it up improperly. That will kind of basically mean that you lose both heating and you'll lose the steam, and the sauna experience won't be any fun at all. So
So you
I
kind
think
of
that.
pump now in that scenario, the machine would be like a machine pumping.
Yeah, pumping all the kind of good stuff out of the sauna.
Yeah.
That's the worst that can happen. I've also seen it happen here in Finland. So I don't think, I hope the rest of the world won't be catching up on that trend too much.
Okay, but with vents that aren't mechanical, that are just open and allow air to come through naturally, are they fairly, because I mean usually they're open and close as well, right?
Mhm.
And but
Yeah.
the reason I think it's important is because actually you mentioned all this in the book. This needs to be considered quite early on in the design, because
Mhm.
it's one of
Yeah.
the first things you do when you build.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that is true. So it's kind of a little bit when you design, it's one of the last things. But when you start building, it's actually one of the first things, because it goes underneath almost all of the other structures, and gets eventually almost completely hidden out of sight.
Interesting. So last thing to design, but first thing to put in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
great.
Well, almost last thing to design. I think what I usually design last is actually the kind of interior finishes, because like cladding materials, because they will be also installed last. But definitely the ventilation has kind of special role early on.
And I also want to really recommend for everyone who reads this book, the piece you've written about the culture, getting to know Finnish sauna, the eras of Finnish sauna. I thought it was super interesting, but we don't have time to talk about that today. So I'm afraid, guys, just gonna have to get hold of this book. And
Should
it's
we?
time to move on, but there is some more questions, I'm sure, that have come up throughout our conversation. So I'm going to hand you over to Gabrielle to go through those. And Lassi, that was really fun. Great to meet
Thanks, Katie.
you
It's been
again.
amazing chat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both so much. Yeah, it's just amazing to listen to the depth of knowledge that you both have, and it's an incredible reminder of how important it is as the UK sauna movement grows and the BSS grows, that as many people as possible need to be able to listen to this kind of wisdom. It's what started the UK sauna movement, and it's what's going to keep it growing. So thank you both so much. Before I get onto questions, I will do, which I'm sure a lot of you are very excited about, I'll do the prize draw. So if you didn't manage to clock it, anyone who has registered was also entered into a prize draw to win a signed copy of Lassi's new book. So I will do the draw now. Bear with me. Okay, we have, sorry if any of these mispronounced, Ian Whalen, Jenny Whittam, and Hannah Brennan. So congratulations on winning a copy. We will follow up because we've got all of your email addresses. So on to questions. So one from Vanessa. So yeah, a very great question, especially here in the UK, where we love nothing more than a seaside sauna. What are the implications of building a Finnish sauna on the coast versus somewhere more inland, like a woodland?
Yeah, good question. I think we already kind of touched upon the fact that like this, the effect of salty seawater and also, I mean, even the air on the coast side and on the seaside is actually a little bit different than in mainlands. So I think using those stainless steel fasteners for the sauna construction is actually most important in that sense. Then you also have, when it comes to actual, for instance, sauna heater itself, we do have people who live here in Finland. We have, even though, so we are here by the Baltic Sea, so the Baltic Sea is actually not that the salt content in the Baltic Sea is actually much less than it's in the Atlantic, so it's actually not that heavy stuff. But still, people who live in or who have cabins or villas in the archipelago or the islands, they usually experience that their heaters will tend to kind of rust and go bad much quicker than if you are somewhere in the mainland or on the lakeside. So so what people usually try to do is that they try to kind of protect their heaters. One thing is that you can, for instance, take off all the stones for the winter period if you're not using the heater, because that kind of reduces the condensation that gets inside the heater. You could also try to find a heater that's made out of a little bit more stronger stuff. That might not be so easy. It all depends on whether you're looking for a wood burner or an electrical heater, but that's actually good to take into consideration that what is the material that the heater is made of? How will it be kind of more how well it will tolerate this type of like salty air environment in the longer run. I think those are the kind of really biggest things. Other than that, I don't think the construction itself or the building itself is probably not going to be much different.
Okay, thank you. And another question from Laura. A great question. What kind of skills and experience and knowledge would someone need to build a sauna after reading your book? Do you have to have advanced skills, or can you be a bit of a novice?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Laura. Yeah, this is actually something that I, from the very beginning, one of the first things that I wrote in the book, I was trying to also kind of explain to myself that who's the, what sort of reader I'm trying to address here. And my kind of eventual answer to this question, which is I think I've also tried to articulate in the book, is that this book is for a person who's already has some experience in building or construction itself. Because I quickly realized that so this book now has like 320 pages. And I think I could have easily spent about like 500 pages just in kind of doing this step-by-step sauna construction advice. So what I had to do is that I basically had to presume that the person who's reading the book also already knows something about like basic construction stuff. For instance, framing. Framing is one crucial word that comes up every now and then when you're reading the book, because there was just unfortunately not enough space to kind of go through all this basic construction stuff. So how I would say is that the book has been written for people who have some knowledge about construction in general. So you might be able to build, say, garage or a shed or something like this. And with this book, you'll be able to also apply that knowledge to sauna, because now you get the kind of sauna specific construction knowledge. But I don't really kind of instruct you how to use a hammer or how to kind of make measurements. that is knowledge that you need to gain somewhere else. So unfortunately, this is not kind of totally IKEA style manual.
YouTube is good for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then last question from Mark. So sauna design for the UK wild saunas I've visited vary from flat ceilings to curved ones. In design, does the ceiling roof shape matter for effectiveness, especially for löyly?
Yeah, for löyly, it does matter. Then again, we have like ideal and realistic scenarios. So if you go around Finland, you'll find that I think probably like 95% of all of our saunas will have a flat ceiling, which is not that particularly fancy, but it works. And I think maybe one thing to kind of take into consideration is that people usually end up doing the flat ceiling just because of the fact that it's so much more easy to do than any other shape. But then again, you could then kind of think about it so that if the sauna gets larger, you can also kind of use a flat ceiling and do this kind of a guides in the ceiling itself that will manipulate how the steam actually goes around, because the steam löyly will naturally first go up and hit the ceiling, and then if you have kind of if we kind of place any type of like blocks there, say like a 6 or 8 inch boards in the ceiling, we can practically kind of slow down the movement of the löyly in the ceiling. So these kind of manipulations are still possible even if you have a flat ceiling. Of course, this type of like more dome type of a ceiling type is kind of most ideal if you want to have very like even and kind of nicely moving steam löyly in your sauna. But I think if most of the Finnish people are able to live with a flat ceiling, I think people outside Finland will find that acceptable as well. So I wouldn't be that worried about that particular detail in the sauna. But it's it matters, but it's not that kind of crucial thing. What a politically correct answer, I think.
Right, that takes us to the end of the questions. So yeah, thank you again to Katie and Lassi. That was such a wonderful talk. Everyone who came and has watched this webinar, thank you again for coming. Lassi, we will be following up to everyone who registered and again onto our newsletters about more information about Lassi's wonderful book. And if you've got questions towards Lassi, how's best to get in contact with you?
Yeah, you can find me. I have an Instagram account at Saunologia. I'll actually I'll type it here. That's my Instagram handle. I think that's where I can be reached. And also, of course, I have the website for saunologia.fi where you can reach me. And I'm kind of shamelessly plug my upcoming kind of a sauna innovation conference that will happen in December. It's also free of charge and will happen in the UK after or evening hours, so it should be also kind of accessible to anyone who wants to kind of deepen their knowledge about the sauna technology part. Yeah, okay. You will find me online.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and I wish you a
Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you so much. Lovely to see you all.